They're not watching because they miss you. They're watching because they can't figure out what broke their grip. The same people who once walked through your inner world like they owned the blueprints are now hovering at the edges of your presence, trying to decode the silence you've wrapped yourself in. Their eyes crawl over your digital footprints like archaeologists desperate to find proof that you're still the same person they buried under their expectations. But nothing they dig up will match the version of you that's rising now. They're staring at the reflection of a self they never helped build, one they can no longer predict or disassemble. They don't know how to process the fact that they're witnessing someone escape the gravity of every label they tried to pin you down with. The confusion in their gaze is nothing short of panic, the quiet kind that settles in the bones when control slips through shaking hands. While they linger in analysis, you've been in transformation. But not the kind they're used to. This isn't about becoming better in ways they understand. It's about shedding the invisible contracts you never signed. It's about waking up and realizing you don't owe them access to the updated version of your soul. And while they're mapping out your history, you've already built the architecture of your future on land they were never invited to see. You're not disappearing. You're just no longer available for roles you've outgrown. What they're calling mystery is really just your refusal to collapse into old dimensions for their comfort. You didn't change for them, you changed away from them. And that direction is irreversible. They sense it. That's why their curiosity feels more like an emergency. Behind every frantic scroll and lingering visit is a subconscious knowing. The gate they used to enter you has been sealed shut, not with bitterness, but with truth. And truth is what terrifies them most. Not because it's harsh, but because it never needed their approval to exist. They're realizing now that they weren't a chapter in your story. They were a footnote in a book you stopped writing when you discovered your own voice. They're not researching you, they're mourning the version of you that used to seek their validation. And even that mourning is selfish. It's not about your growth. It's about their loss of influence. You were their mirror. And now that mirror is gone, they're left staring at themselves, unfiltered, for the first time. It's not your evolution that haunts them. It's the silence where their control used to echo. This isn't revenge. This is realignment. This is sacred distance. This is what it looks like when divine timing overrides old bonds. Some are meant to witness your evolution from a distance. And some will never understand the cost of the peace you had to protect, even if it meant vanishing from the places they still expected you to return to. They don't want updates. They want reassurance that the version of you they manipulated is still buried somewhere beneath your silence. The ones who used to toss your energy around like it had no weight are now tracing every movement, every shift, like they're trying to crack a code only you understand. This isn't interest, it's unraveling in slow motion. They never planned for you to become unpredictable. Now they're scavenging for signs that you might still be vulnerable to their old tricks. They've convinced themselves they care, that this is concern. But their interest is tinted with anxiety they don't know how to name. It's not love, not even nostalgia, it's the hollow ache of losing power over something they assumed was permanent. There was a time when your comfort was their playground, when your generosity was a tool they sharpened for their own use. But that door has closed without warning, and this new silence doesn't respond to pleading. If you've been touched by God's goodness, don't keep it to yourself. Click super thank you and sow a gift of $40 or more to help spread His light. Your giving becomes a ripple of grace, blessing hearts and building His kingdom. Let His overflow pour through you. That shift wasn't an announcement. It wasn't broadcast or explained. It was subtle, seismic, the kind of shift that rearranges an entire foundation while the house still looks the same. The tolerance that used to drip from your voice is gone. And now, every time they try to interact, they're met with something colder, cleaner, and completely out of reach. Not cruel, just untouchable. That's what scares them. Boundaries have become your new native language, and they can't translate it. Where they once found loopholes, now they find locked doors. The word that used to tremble on your lips, the one they thought you couldn't say, has become a commandment. It doesn't come with explanation or guilt anymore. It stands on its own, sharp and sovereign. And the more you say it, the more they panic, because it signals something they can't unlearn. They thought this was about a temporary change, a season, a phase. But what they're witnessing isn't a rebellion, it's a recalibration. You're not responding differently just to prove a point. You've rebuilt your inner wiring. The emotional infrastructure that once bent under pressure now hums with clarity. They kept pressing the same buttons, expecting the same reactions. But the panel doesn't work anymore, it runs on a frequency they've never touched. This evolution didn't come with fireworks. It arrived in fragments, a decision here, a refusal there, until suddenly you were operating in a realm beyond their assumptions. While they still see you as a familiar puzzle, you've become a completely different equation. And the more they study, the less they understand. They're trying to map a terrain that no longer belongs to their memory. The real twist? You didn't evolve to hurt them. You evolved because peace finally mattered more than appeasement. Because growth demanded sacrifices they couldn't make with you. They were never your mirror, they were your weight. And now that you've stepped into lightness, they're left grasping at shadows that no longer fit your outline. The research continues, but the subject has already ascended. What's been unfolding within isn't just growth, it's ignition. Wave after wave of internal upgrades have sharpened your instincts, amplified your clarity, and made your presence feel unpredictable in the best kind of way. Not because you're unstable, but because you're no longer broadcasting from frequencies they recognize. They used to anticipate your reactions. Now, their calculations fail, and the space you hold leaves them scrambling to catch up with something they no longer understand. There's a wisdom moving through you that can't be explained by logic or history. It's not borrowed knowledge or inherited identity. It's the raw intelligence of remembering, not information, but alignment. Actions no longer arise from guilt or approval seeking. Decisions feel effortless because they flow from a center that no longer negotiates with chaos. People don't know how to meet this version of you, one who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't explain. And that unfamiliarity unnerves them. But what's taking place now is more than mental clarity or emotional detachment, it's an opening. An expansion of perception so deep, it's like walking through a world with new eyes. The illusions that once wrapped you like silk now fall apart when touched. The behaviors you used to justify now look foreign. What once passed for comfort now registers as confinement. And that shift is visible, even when you don't say a word. The energy surrounding you has consolidated into something dense and unmistakable. Every fragment you once gave away has been summoned back and woven into a kind of personal gravity. It's not loud or forceful, but it changes the atmosphere. And that shift is starting to move people, not through confrontation, but through incompatibility. Reality itself is adapting to your new resonance, reshuffling connections without your effort. You're not closing doors, doors are closing themselves. Not out of anger, but because there's no longer a shared rhythm. This isn't abandonment, it's magnetic misalignment. Every bond that remains must now withstand the pressure of your authenticity. Not everyone will. And that's not failure, it's filtration. The universe isn't just elevating you, it's cleaning house for you. Energies that once held space are now being replaced with frequencies that can hold weight. This season brings confrontations disguised as conversations. Patterns will return wearing familiar faces, testing if you still collapse under the same pressures. But you've outgrown that loop. You no longer confuse persistence with love or chaos with passion. They'll try to trigger the old reflexes, but the buttons have been removed. That void, the one where your reaction used to be, is your power. And now, your reality is built on a different metric. Not moments, but momentum. Not gestures, but consistency. One-time efforts no longer earn lifetime access. People will be confused when nostalgia doesn't buy forgiveness, when sentimentality doesn't erase neglect. But this is the new law: show up or disappear. And in this realm, the only loyalty that counts is the kind that doesn't need to be chased. They're holding up old memories like receipts, as if a single moment of decency should grant them unlimited admission into your sacred space. What they don't understand is that your entire system has evolved. That former connection point? Gone. The access code they relied on? Changed without notice. Your requirements have matured, and what once felt like loyalty now registers as expired entitlement. The terms they once agreed to no longer apply, and they were never meant to be permanent. There are no more gradual trials or temporary exceptions in your life. The shift is absolute. Partial effort has been disqualified, and anyone unwilling to meet the full standard gets left behind. That isn't cruelty, that's spiritual integrity. You're about to witness events that confirm your transformation was never just personal growth. It was a realignment, a divine calibration. And the ripple effect of that realignment is about to echo across every connection you've ever outgrown. The consequences arriving now aren't mild nudges from the universe. They're irreversible echoes of every lie, every betrayal, every false gesture. Not as punishment, but as evidence. The ones who once played with your trust are going to feel a pressure they can't trace back to you, but it will carry your imprint. Their secrets will unravel in public, their schemes will collapse under their own weight, and they'll remember your silence as the moment their luck began to shift. And those who fed off your kindness will soon experience an emotional winter they can't thaw. The warmth they drained from you can't be replicated, and now they'll taste life without the safety net you provided. But what's even more profound is this: they don't fear your revenge. They fear your absence. The absence of someone who once soothed storms that weren't theirs to calm. They believed they could predict your path, but the pattern is gone. You've become fluid, wild in the most holy way. Your presence no longer reacts, it recalibrates. Their strategies fall flat against a version of you that doesn't respond with emotion but with discernment. And no matter how close they once stood, they are now on the outside, looking in at a mystery that keeps expanding beyond their grasp. This awakening isn't just a personal bloom, it's a cosmic unveiling. You're being called into visibility, into recognition. The attention you're attracting now isn't just admiration, it's destiny activating in full force. But with that recognition comes separation. The light you're stepping into is designed to expose the shadows clinging to your past. And that separation? It's protection disguised as progression. Everything that once convinced you to shrink, every internal whisper that said stay small, play safe, be quiet, is being dismantled by a surge of awareness you can no longer deny. The illusions that made you question your value have dissolved. And in their place, a blazing certainty that what you offer is irreplaceable. The truth has returned to your voice, and now your reality is being rewritten in your favor. The entire way your body interprets reality is under reconstruction. What once triggered hesitation now activates direction. Where fear used to make decisions, clarity now takes the lead. And those who once thrived off your uncertainty are beginning to feel the sting of irrelevance. This new calibration isn't just a mindset, it's a full system upgrade that's forcing those who underestimated you to squirm in their own assumptions. There's no part of you left that's willing to invest in outcomes rooted in lack. You no longer act from the hope of being noticed, you move with the knowledge that every step returns multiplied. Not by chance, but by law. Every breath carries the vibration of someone who's finally unlocked the key to manifestation, not wishing, but knowing. But with that certainty comes pressure, and not everyone around you is ready for the atmosphere you now carry. There are whispers being stirred. half-truths polished into weapons. People believe they possess some version of your story they can twist into leverage. But their tools don't work on you anymore. There is no need to explain, to argue, or to clear your name. The most commanding sound in your arsenal has become your silence, and it thunders louder than any defense you could speak. You've stopped performing for approval. The energy once spent on explaining your vision is now preserved for building it. When they prod at your boundaries, all they get in return is the emptiness of unmet expectation. Not because you're cold, but because you've risen above the emotional traps they mistook for conversation. What they interpret as distance is actually discipline, the refusal to waste energy on fruitless cycles. They're reaching, always reaching, hoping to extract some detail they can spin, some signal that you're still within their orbit. But this version of you no longer leaves breadcrumbs. You move without announcements, without backtracking, and they're suffocating in the absence of your availability. What they once thought was stubbornness is actually sovereignty, and it terrifies them more than your vulnerability ever did. Consistency has become your currency. You no longer negotiate with inconsistency dressed as effort. They keep testing your resolve, expecting you to fold at the sound of familiar tactics. But you've already burned that script. The person they're waiting on no longer lives here. You're not rejecting them from spite. You've simply evolved beyond what they still worship, the cycle of almost. This is the peak of your detachment, not out of bitterness, but brilliance. You've paused everything that drains. You've stepped away from the noise to reclaim every piece of yourself that was lost in obligation. And now, with nothing left to prove, you're finally hearing your own voice without interruption. That stillness? It's sacred. And from it, something colossal is rising, something that will never need permission to exist again. There's a deep remembrance stirring, not of people, not of places, but of presence. The more you realign with the essence inside you, the more your energy rejects environments that chip away at your wholeness. The stillness you've been cultivating isn't emptiness, it's preparation. Something ancient within you is calling itself back from every corner where it was once diluted. What you're feeling now is a retrieval of self, and it's blooming in silence. This isn't about seeking love, it's about reclaiming it. Not from another, but from the version of yourself that once traded radiance for belonging. You're rediscovering the joy of your own rhythm, the safety in your own thoughts, the thrill of visions too big to be explained. The longing you feel is not sadness, it's directional. It's pointing you back to the moment before you forgot you were whole all along. There's a subtle rebellion happening under your skin. Patterns that once kept you pacified now feel unbearable. The spaces you used to shrink into no longer fit your spirit. What once comforted now irritates, and what once seemed acceptable now feels intolerable. This unease isn't regression. It's revelation. Your intuition is remodeling your entire existence behind the scenes, clearing out space for a reality that can actually hold you. Every impulse to evolve, every urge to pivot, that's not restlessness, that's instruction. That's your spirit unfolding a map that only you can read. And while you're aligning with this clarity, someone who once dismissed your worth is being met with consequences crafted by forces they can't negotiate with. What's about to happen isn't retaliation. It's regulation. The scales are rebalancing, and your elevation is the trigger. There were things you gave freely, time, kindness, energy, as if they had no cost. But the bill has come due, and you're not the one paying. The ones who overlooked your value are beginning to feel the weight of what they misused. Systems they relied on are cracking, comforts are disappearing, and while they descend into confusion, you are being lifted by a current they can't follow. What's being returned to you isn't just material, it's multidimensional. Confidence that can't be shaken. Peace that doesn't ask for permission. Clarity that doesn't apologize for disrupting the room. You've outlived every label they tried to stamp onto your name. After all the quiet endurance, all the smiling through disrespect, you've stepped into an authority that answers to no one but truth. A familiar shadow is preparing to resurface, someone who once knew how to twist your boundaries with soft words and predictable timing. But this time, their strategy collapses before it begins. Not because you're bitter, but because you're unavailable to anyone who only shows up when the consequences start knocking. And for the first time, they'll realize that access to you was never a guarantee, it was a privilege they lost forever. Every time you tried to clarify yourself to someone who was committed to misunderstanding you, you were offering pieces of your essence for free. The ones who stirred conflict weren't looking for clarity, they were looking for control. They didn't want truth, they wanted fuel. But you've unplugged. That cord they used to pull has been cut. Not with rage, but with wisdom. There's no need to argue when your reality speaks louder than words ever could. They've been rehearsing scenarios where you'd respond, where your attention could be harvested like a crop. But they never prepared for your silence. You've chosen absence as your answer, distance as your response. It isn't avoidance, it's alignment. No one gets to poke at your peace and then act surprised when their access dissolves into nothing. Let them talk. You've chosen stillness over spectacle. They believed they had a lifelong pass to your energy field, a pass granted when you still confused kindness with permission. But you've stripped away every false layer, and the power they once mistook as softness now stands unshaken. The self you're becoming can't be baited, can't be touched without reverence. The weight of your authenticity breaks their illusions at the root. What hurts them most is not your growth, it's the realization that your evolution left no forwarding address. You're not just healing from betrayal. You're healing from the internal permission slips you once signed to stay in places that shrank you. The opinions flying around your name now? They're echoes bouncing off walls you no longer live behind. The real version of you doesn't flinch at whispers, it thrives above them. Their attempts to reframe your story fall apart when truth begins to magnetize. The same people who tried to twist your essence are now being silenced by outcomes they can't discredit. And the revelation they face is sobering. You were never reacting. You were observing. And now that you've stepped into your authority, they're exposed not by confrontation, but by contrast. Relationships are no longer fueled by dependency. They're powered by resonance. You don't stay out of need, you choose to remain where the frequency feeds your becoming. That shift in dynamic dismantles manipulation. It exposes performative gestures and magnifies those who only stayed when you were easy to access. But you're not orbiting their gravity anymore, you've become your own center. There's a quality in you now that rattles falsehoods at the root. People can't explain why they feel unsettled in your presence, but their spirit knows. It's the sensation of standing near someone who has walked through fire without asking to be saved. Even your quiet kindness carries weight. It's no longer politeness, it's precision. A gesture from you now feels like a decree. Because it is. And those who still take it lightly are about to learn what it means to be touched by grace they can no longer reach. You've become the topic of countless closed-door conversations, not because you've asked for attention, but because your transformation is impossible to ignore. The very act of embodying your truth has become a mirror some people never asked to look into. And while a few are inspired, many are unnerved. Not because you've harmed them, but because your alignment reveals everything they're pretending not to feel. Your aura doesn't just shine, it disrupts. The precision with which you now move makes others hesitate to approach. They sense the impenetrable structure around you, a quiet force field built not of arrogance, but of sacred refinement. They don't know how to access it, and they shouldn't. The intricacies of your evolution are shielded from those who once fed on your vulnerability. What they call mystery is actually divine protection. They keep pressing the same buttons that once sparked reactions, waiting for the version of you that used to flinch, to please, to fold. But that frequency no longer exists in your system. These attempts aren't tests from them, they're tests from the universe itself. Every moment you choose presence over panic, awareness over impulse, you prove that you've not only upgraded, you've integrated. There's a kind of power that doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't defend, it doesn't explain, it just holds its line. That's what you've activated now. Your discernment is sharp, but your tone is still. And yet, it speaks louder than ever. Some people still cling to a faded memory of who they thought you were. They're trying to trade favors from the past for relevance in your present. But the currency has changed. Where others chase recognition, you've chosen reliability. You're no longer seduced by intensity or performance. You're watching patterns, measuring consistency, observing who shows up when it's not convenient. That one impressive moment someone keeps replaying in their mind doesn't impress you anymore. What matters now is rhythm, not spikes. Presence, not performance. Loyalty, not legacy. You've seen enough now to recognize when someone's effort is engineered to appear whole while deliberately withholding what matters most. That final portion, the part they never give, isn't an oversight. It's a decision. And you're no longer available to fill in the emotional blank spaces people refuse to own. Wholeness is the minimum requirement now, not the reward. Your energy is no longer an open marketplace. Access is not granted through sentiment or shared history. And though some will say you've changed, what's actually happening is this: you've remembered who you were before you needed to be decoded. And now, the ones who never truly saw you are left speaking in circles, trying to understand a version of you they were never meant to hold. There's a game being played in half-light, one where they never say what they mean, but always say just enough to keep you guessing. You've watched someone dangle possibility in front of you like bait, never giving the full truth, never closing the door, yet refusing to walk through it. That push and pull isn't accidental. It's a mechanism. A way of keeping your loyalty in limbo while they enjoy the benefits of your full presence without offering theirs in return. It wasn't that you misread them. You saw flashes of what they could be. You witnessed rare moments of clarity and thought, maybe that's who they truly are. But it wasn't confusion on their part, it was calculation. The inconsistency wasn't immaturity, it was a tactic. They chose just enough effort to keep you attached, just enough affection to blur the line between real and role play. You've been walking through multiple rooms of your life, noticing a repeated pattern: people who give less than they take. They want your stability, your attention, your support, but on their terms, and without accountability. They want the benefits of deep connection without the responsibility of showing up. And for a long time, your grace covered it. But not anymore. The scale has tipped. You've pulled your energy back into your own hands. You've stopped negotiating with people who only show up when they need something. There is no more "let's see how this goes." There is no more waiting for them to rise. You've closed the open tab. You're no longer offering endless chances to people who keep choosing themselves over the connection they claim to value. And this shift, this unapologetic return to self-worth, has sent shockwaves into every space where you were once underestimated. The ones who grew comfortable in your tolerance are now feeling the pressure of your evolution. It's not just that you raised the standard. It's that you're no longer making exceptions. What was once optional for them has become non-negotiable for you. Now they're left scrambling, not because they miss you, but because they miss the imbalance. They miss the version of you that kept showing up while they decided whether they'd participate. But this version doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't shrink. You've rewritten the rules in silence, and they weren't prepared for the new terms of engagement. Some of them simply don't have the emotional depth to meet you at your current level, and that's not your responsibility to fix. You've stopped mistaking potential for promise. You've stopped translating their effort into worth. And in this new reality, access is reserved for those who arrive whole, not those who arrive hopeful that you'll complete what they refuse to become.